Welcome to the Parallel Universe. Here's your host, Glenn Goldberg.
Hi, everyone. Glenn Goldberg here, CEO of Parallel Communications. I'd like to welcome you to this version of the Parallel Universe, where we talk with the movers and shakers in the business technology space. Today, we have the great privilege to have with us Jon Arnold, who's principal of J Arnold and Associates, a market research firm based in Toronto, Canada. Jon covers the global enterprise communications and related spaces. And we're delighted to have him here, get some of his insights, and talk about some other things he likes, like football, keyboards, things like that. Jon, welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, Glenn. Well, we've known each other a long time, and it doesn't matter whether it happens sooner or later. That it happens, and I'm
Absolutely.
part of the parallel universe here that you have been creating for a while.
Well, Jon, you're always a member of the Parallel Universe, and glad to have you in this video format of that. So it's our pleasure to have you. So, Jon, just for our audience, just kind of give an overview of the things you look at and your role as a technology analyst.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. And so I have been an independent tech analyst for almost 20 years now, a long time. And our tribe is pretty unique. There's just a handful of specialty kind of one-man show, one-woman show analysts out there, and we're all very well known and we all know each other quite well. And that role is a little different from that of being an analyst in a firm where for example, I used to work at Frost and Sullivan, and the responsibilities I had there are very different from what I do as an independent. So we work very differently, typically with the vendors, just like the big analyst firms do. And the needs keep evolving with technology. And so the good news that keeps analysts like me going, Glenn, and your business too, is with all these new iterations that get more and more complicated, there's more stuff that needs to be understood and explained. And that's kind of the core of what analysts do, right? We try to explain things to, in our case, decision makers, and do it in language they can relate to. So if you ask
And
an
you do
engineer
that
to do
very
what I
well, Jon. Yeah.
thank you.
And you're always one of our go-to people when we want to talk about a new trend or a new technology or how it's impacting the market, which leads us to a good topic now, which is Gen AI and its really presence in the enterprise space, how businesses are kind of flocking to it. Um, I have a saying, you may disagree, that with Gen AI, we're on the 2 yard line with 98 yards to go. So we're really in its infancy. So from what you hear in the marketplace, we know enterprises are kind of falling all over themselves to say, I want to implement this. The tech vendors, everyone is jumping onto the AI bandwagon. Where is it in its trajectory from your perspective in terms of serving the real needs of the SMB market, which is still probably 95% of the potential market out there?
Well, I don't know, Glenn. I think there could be a safety coming here. I do. Just a couple of bad moves and you're sacked in the end zone. This is not all forward progress in this game. So, and maybe more like rugby that way, right? There's no forward passing. So you have to be very careful with this stuff. And just for 10 seconds, just to make sure people understand what we mean by Gen AI. And the Gen is generative. And that's a different iteration in the flavors of AI we've been doing up till that point, where AI has been more about basically just speech recognition, speech to text, basically replicating what we say and letting AI be able to understand it. Now with Gen AI, it's spitting it back to us. So whereas before it was more person to machine communications, and now it's more machine to person comms,
Mhm.
where it is drawing from many sources on the web and across large language models to kind of figure out what it is you need it to say. So the challenge with this stuff, you hear this term about being us having to be prompt engineers now. So the idea is it's only as good as the direction you give it. So if you ask it to give very generic things, you'll get very generic things. But if it's like search, right? We all learn the more specific, the better the language is, and the more the words line up to say exactly what you want, you'll get much more precise answers back. And because Gen AI isn't really search, it's a form of search, but what it's really is, it's actually doing some of the heavy lifting for you in terms of writing a response.
Right, and formulating those responses.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why it gets traction in businesses, because that way we have to spend less time composing emails, and thinking about, like in the contact center, some of these kind of canned responses. Let Gen AI do it, and for the most part, it can be okay. But of course, it's those exceptions where you hear that term hallucinations come from, and that's where you start to, take a few steps backwards.
So that's where you lose the yardage with the hallucinations. If you put too much stock in it, you're going to be disappointed because there are going to be, at this point, certainly in its early stage, more mistakes than many people anticipate.
Yeah, so I talk about like omission versus commission. So as George Costanza would say on Seinfeld, it's not a lie if you believe it. So that's one thing. And we know some people who are like that who are on TV all day long. But the other part is, because AI doesn't know anything, right? It has no idea it's hallucinating, right? It doesn't realize it's not understanding you properly.
Right,
That's the more dangerous part, because you get a little too comfortable with this stuff. You start to trust it, and you don't question it, or you're not as
right,
scrutinous with it.
right. So it's based on a series of approximations, very good approximations, and probably more higher probable approximations than than other technologies. But when you cobble together all these approximations, you could be a much further away from the
Yeah.
result that's accurate than you anticipate.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe if there's one takeaway, I know we got a lot of things we want to hit on here, Glenn.
Yeah.
The one takeaway is here to me is that AI never gives you absolute answers.
Mhm.
It's all based on probabilistic assumptions that, with a high degree of accuracy,
Right.
this is the expected outcome that will happen if you do X, Y, Z. But it never, it's like statistics. We can predict crowds, what large numbers of people will do, but we cannot predict with statistics what individuals will do. So we're a long way from getting it to that level where we can trust it for what it says to you is going to be correct, what it says to me is going to be correct. We're a long way from that. So yeah, just keep in mind, these are, as you say, approximations. It's not reality. It's an approximation of reality.
So let me talk about some of the recent acquisitions that have been going on in the space. So, for example, Five9's acquired Acqueon. And I would, look at Acqueon as, certainly a layer above a contact center platform.
Mhm.
Are we starting to see a higher degree of emphasis based on this quote unquote application layer? Do you see more of these types of transactions where the platform providers want to get more of these, um, applications and business productivity services under their belts?
Yeah, I mean they're coming back to sports, they are trying to follow the puck. They may not know where it's
Right.
going, but right,
Right.
so they see, oh, contact center, we need more of this kind of conversational engagement with customers. So we have to add capabilities. The thing is, with these AI technologies that are evolving so fast, companies don't have the luxury to develop a lot of things like they used to. So if they have to catch up, things change in terms of weeks and months, not years, right? So a lot of these acquisitions are made because it's the only way to keep pace. Companies like Zoom, not to single them out, but are very R&D focused, they have the resources to commit to keep that pace of innovation going. And everybody else, the ones who can't, have to, along the way, probably sooner or later have to make those acquisitions to kind
So
of
they've got to go the buy path.
fill the gap. And
Yeah.
it's not just so they can keep pace with their competitors, but for companies like Five9, who have been rumored to be an acquisition target, for example, the more you add pieces like this, it's kind of like a strategy to make your company, harder to buy, or more valuable to buy, right? Because you have fewer missing pieces. So there's definitely a strategic driver to this beyond what the technology brings.
All right, so this is a valuation part of it as well, in terms of increasing that enterprise value for them.
Yeah, and of course, it's always easy to make smaller acquisitions than bigger ones, right? And
Mhm.
the ecosystem in the AI world is pretty rich. There's a lot, but of course, a lot of them are so heavily overvalued and, not really tied to revenues. And that's a whole other thing that you talk about being at the 2 yard line. We may be back at the half-yard line later in the year because um, companies may just reach a point where I can only afford to spend so much on AI without seeing solid returns. So there is definitely an element of being vendor driven in this space right now, right? It's coming faster than businesses are able to absorb it and deliver the ROI that the vendors say is out there for them. That is happening, but not en masse, not yet.
Okay. So I guess a tangential subject real quick is this whole issue of convergence between UC and CC, because contact center platforms have pretty much today almost all the communications features and functionality that UC platforms contain. You can, and there are much fewer traditional call centers now than there were years past. So if you can serve an informal contact center through a unified communications platform, you're probably 80% of the way there in terms of being a contact center provider. So do you see this convergence as a real thing and something that's going to continue to be appealing to vendors?
Well, I do. And I think what most people will tell you is that that particular form of convergence is definitely happening in the SMB space, and to some extent in the mid-market as well. You can look at that and there's no denying that this is a trend and it has been for a few years now. And there are some good reasons for it in terms of rationalizing your spend on how many vendors, how many platforms.
Yep.
That is true. But at the other hand, it's also undeniable that for the most part, the pure play contact center guys, you mentioned Five9, Talkdesk, 8 by, sorry, Genesis, Nice, right? The single focus players, for the most part, they're doing very well. They are holding their own. So if they'd be going away if that trend was absolute, but it's not. When you move into
Right.
the larger enterprise scenarios where they're more complex and certainly more entrenched in legacy deployments, that's where the pure play guys do their best because
Okay.
they are bringing that complete solution for very complex needs. But like you say, smaller scale in SMB might just be a
Like
help desk of
like
two
in
or three.
Reach, yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, they don't need that level of sophistication. So for them, UCAS, CCAS together is really good. It just simplifies life for everybody, especially IT. And
Yeah.
as you say, you're 80% there, and adding the other pieces is really not that hard to do.
Right. It's pretty much data paths at that point. So a company like InReach that is already proven to be successful in the mid-size space, it certainly would, make sense for them to combine the two platforms into one.
Yeah, and another good point, by the way, especially for SMB, is that cloud generally is a fairly, economically it's attractive. In the long
Right.
run, you are paying more because you're renting, you're not buying. On the other hand, you're getting a platform that is, so it's, OpEx instead of CapEx, but it's also continually renewing. That's the beauty of this technology, the SaaS model, as opposed to the hardware-based model from before. This is not something, oh, I'm paying more money over time. but you know what? You're also getting more value over time because these platforms keep adding features, they keep getting better, and AI itself gets better the more you use it. So it's not like it stays the way it was when you bought it. It will keep pace. So that's what makes it, kind of an evergreen investment.
So let's turn real quickly. I was in Kansas City a couple days ago for a meeting. Obviously, they're the two-time defending Super Bowl champions there. They have a great team. Um, you and many of your colleagues, are from the Boston area, root for the New England Patriots, which is an anathema to me as a New York Jets fan. But let's align, John. Do you see anyone in the horizon that could beat the Chiefs or stop them from winning a third Super Bowl in a row?
Well, if Aaron Rodgers can turn the clock back and work incredible magic with the Jets, and if
That's a big if, but okay.
And
Yeah.
if Tua gets hurt, if Lamar Jackson gets hurt, you might open some pathways, and the Bills have all kinds of problems. So I
uh,
suppose you could catch fire. I suppose Drake May could be the second coming of Tom Brady for the Patriots and make them contenders again. But I don't think so. I
no.
don't think so. So yeah, I I feel guilty of this. I have not done my comparisons like I should have. I don't know how Brady's numbers stack up to Mahomes' numbers at this stage of their
Yeah.
careers. I don't know at this point, did Brady have how many rings? What other things did he have? Is Mahomes on track with Brady's accomplishments?
And to me, I don't know. I just look at them as very different quarterbacks,
Yeah.
right? Um, Brady obviously is in my mind, the greatest quarterback of all time for what he's accomplished. Mahomes may become that. I mean, certainly Mahomes is much more mobile than Brady has ever been. Um, and they're both very clutch quarterbacks, come from behind, they know how to win. Mahomes is very impressive with that. Just the Super Bowl win last year, how he kept his composure, was injured. It's really hard not to root for him and not to
Yeah.
recognize his greatness. Does that translate into a championship? It doesn't, but I don't see anyone out there that could really stop them. Unless something cataclysmic happens, injuries, things like that. Young Aaron Rodgers, the Jets have a very good team this year, but they're the Jets. They're not winning a Super Bowl.
They haven't proven
Um,
anything. Yeah.
yeah, the Niners are good. Is Brock Purdy the real deal? I don't know. Maybe. So I see it's the Chiefs Super Bowl to lose. How about you?
Yeah, I do. I hate to say it, I'd never count out the Eagles. They're another one of those teams that just always finds a way to get things done. And Hurts is a pretty dynamic player, kind of in the same style as Mahomes. So
Yeah,
they do it in their own way. And
he's very good
yeah,
quarterback.
so they're a
Yeah.
hard out for sure. And then and
So
great,
John,
by the way, for small market teams. That to me is the best. To see
well,
them,
Kansas City is definitely a small market team. So
yeah. So
absolutely. So tell me about your trajectory as a keyboard player. I'm always interested, John.
yeah, well, music if I had followed my creative instincts, I would have been a musician for sure. And yes, it's never too late, I suppose. So it's just recreational for me. But yeah, my message to any of your younger listeners, Glenn, is when your kids are young, teach them music. Get them in lessons, whether it's violin or piano or guitar or whatever. But having that kind of mentality is really important because it just connects your brain in certain ways. And I'm lucky, I think, coming from a generation where you know what, you did what your parents told you to do. Nobody likes taking piano lessons as a kid, but I hung on long enough to reach the point where I really started to like it, and then I started to love it, and then I didn't want to do anything else but. And everyone's got to find passions. They all have them in their lives. They have to. That's what keeps us going. And I just say, find a way to keep that going, even if it's just little stuff you do for yourself, because yeah, you never know when things could change and you might get a chance. And you talked earlier about being on a cruise, that's kind of like a retirement fantasy of, having a little combo that plays on cruises, just to entertain people. And it's a great way to see the world.
Oh,
So you never
look, you
know.
can get, it's an enjoyable life if you want to do it. So maybe you can do it back and forth between conferences, transatlantic, and
Yeah, yeah, that
you
would be
kind of
fun
gig that
actually.
way.
Take an ocean liner to Spain or something. Yeah.
So, John, where can everyone find you online?
Yeah. Well, folks, I'm at home most of the time, so I'm not hard to reach. But yeah, the website to me, pretty old school. I know you are too. That's the starting point. J Arnold Associates.com. And yeah, in the modern age, it's LinkedIn for me, so I'm very easy to find there. And yeah, the website tells you a lot about what I do, how I do things, who I work with, and a big part of being an analyst is sharing and giving back. So I do produce a monthly newsletter and a monthly podcast. All that you can get on my website and sign up if you want to subscribe. So that's kind of the story there. I'm not hard to find. And yes, conferences, yeah, they'll be back on the road in September. They never end. It's a big part of what we do.
Well, John, we'll be certain to track you down at a few conferences. We always have a good time. It's
Yeah.
always a good conversation. Um, Great to have you here. Great. Thank you so much for the insights, and we will see you soon.
All right. We sure will, Glenn. And thanks everybody for listening and thanks for having me on.